It's the most important road in Wales. The M4 connects the south and the west of the country. It links us to England and beyond. And thousands of us rely on it for our work every day. But it's more than 40 years old, and it's feeling the strain.
Look at this. I mean, this is crazy.
I'm stopping, starting every kind of few metres or so because the traffic's really bad again.
So we're late already?
Yep, for sure.
A relief road to take some of the pressure off has been ruled out. So what next?
Clearly, we don't want a reputation of being one of the worst bottlenecks in the UK.
Tonight, week in, week out, investigates the state of the M4. Just how bad is it? And what's being done to make sure we keep moving? A familiar sight to thousands of us. Tailbacks on the M4 and roadworks. It can be even worse, much worse. Congestion is estimated to cost the Welsh economy £40 million every year. Tonight, I'll be meeting drivers who use the M4 every day and businesses who depend on it. We're out with the traffic cops to see the difficulties they face policing it, and we'll be examining the efforts to improve it. Of course, the motorway never sleeps. This is life on the M4 over 24 hours.
I'm on my way into work to present Good Morning Wales on Radio Wales. It's the early hours of the morning, and you'd expect the motorway to be a clear run. Always used to be. But in recent months there have been lane closures and even the whole carriageway closed. And it's that unpredictability that's causing people problems.
And with the BBC Radio Wales travel, here's Jacob Stroud.
On the M4 then, busy around 41 at Baglin in both directions, queuing on the eastbound exit Slip Road at 32 at Corriton, an earlier broken down vehicle long since shifted but still causing a backlog of delays. Further east, slow through the roadworks past 29 and the A48M.
Katie Phillips, who's a civil servant, listens carefully to the traffic reports. Most days she makes the 60-mile round trip from her home in Bridgend to work in Newport, and it's taking its toll.
Really, really tiring. I'm finding that I've been getting quite a lot of pain in my neck and my shoulders. I think it's probably from constantly having to look over your shoulder because the traffic's so bad. And, stopping, starting. But yeah, it wears you out after a while. You've been in work all day, you just want to get home, relax, and then you're stuck kind of 45 minutes, an hour some days to get back, and yeah, it's horrible.
Katie's been keeping a video diary for us of her journey to and from work for a week.
Okay, exactly the same thing has happened again this morning. It's Wednesday. Just got to the first bit of the roadworks, and I'm stopping, starting every kind of few metres or so because the traffic's really bad again. And the traffic's slowed down loads, gone down to doing 35. All lanes are pretty busy. Loads of spray on the road and lots of people changing lanes and driving too close to each other. It's not very nice driving conditions this morning.
Later in the programme, we'll be catching up with Katie, finding out her highs and lows as she records a week of commutes on the M4. Loading up in Cwmbran, Rob Evans is a hands-on boss. He still mucks in and drives the company lorries when he needs to. And today, he's got to negotiate the M4 in rush hour.
OK, so where are we going, Bob?
What we're going to do is go down Malpas Road onto the M4 and then go down into St Mellons. We've got a customer there that we're going to deliver to. That's going to be our first drop in Fortran Road in St Mellons.
Today, he's invited me to find out how the M4 affects his business.
So what have we got on board today?
14 pallets.
Right.
Various product. It's going to be delivered in a CF postcode to 8 different customers. So you can imagine that's a fair bit to get around.
So really, Rob, the pressure's on you all the time, isn't it, to get to the next place in the time you've meant to be doing?
basically, if you don't get it there, when you lose out, or you get an extra payment to do that time delivery.
Right.
But if you don't get it there, you don't get paid.
If you miss that, obviously there's the frustration and the embarrassment, but you lose money as well, do you?
You lose money, and obviously we get scored for it as well through our network, and they're really particular about that. That you know, if you don't hit your time deliveries, you don't hit your AMs or your 24-hour time, what happens is that you get put on a graph and it's sort of the wall of shame, you know.
Rob has 30 lorries in his fleet. Each one is delayed on average 2 hours a week. Rob says that costs the business thousands of pounds a year, and the M4 is a big part of that.
Here we go.
So this is when your blood pressure begins to rise.
Well, you try and stay cool, that's for sure, because as the day goes on, I think if you're going to put yourself under pressure this early in the morning, by the time you get to 2 or 3 o'clock, you're really under pressure.
In Rob's line of work, time is money, and he has to take congestion into account to make sure his business is competitive.
So how are we doing for time then, Rob?
Well, we left just after 10 to 8. It's now 8:45 coming up. So, yeah, it's going to take us the best part of an hour to do this trip, which should be 20, 25 minutes.
So we're late already,
Yep, for sure.
and this is our first drop-off.
First drop. Only another 10 to do. So we've bought plenty of sandwiches for me to eat, coffee, Yorkie bars.
Rob was very conscious of how much the M4 can affect his business. And the road's importance to our economy shouldn't be underestimated. I'm off to meet a man who can tell us more.
So how important would you say the M4 is for, like, the whole economy of Wales?
The M4 is absolutely vital to the economy, to Wales as a whole, and in particular, of course, to South Wales. We simply couldn't do without it. It links the main cities of the south together. It does the trunk routes to and from Ireland. It's an integral part of the economy of South Wales. There's no question about that.
Dr Beresford has calculated that the M4 contributes about £2 billion to the Welsh economy every year, and congestion costs around £40 million.
Does it matter, do you think, to the economy if the road is unreliable and just plain slow sometimes?
I think it matters very much because the economy does spin around the roads, like it or not. 90% of our transport is by road. It's a matter of quantifying the delays. The delays do add up to, let's say, £10 to £20 per hour, if we're looking at wage rates and salaries. And you can immediately come up with a figure of delays if people are stuck doing nothing in traffic jams.
Janet Harris knows what it's like to be stuck in traffic on the M4. She's a business consultant based in Newport. She regularly uses the road to travel to meetings with clients. Today, she's trying to get to Swansea.
The bit that infuriates me more than anything, and I'm sure it's everybody else, is when you see miles and miles and miles of cones, but you don't see anybody working on it. Look at this. I mean, this is crazy. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. Every one of those people are going to be stuck there for at least an hour. Can the Welsh Assembly guarantee that their road widening policy will absolutely ensure that we won't see what we've just seen now with all the traffic, you know, caught in a jam? I'm doing over the speed limit now. I know it's only 3 or 4 miles an hour, but I shouldn't be. And you're doing it to try and make up for the time that we've got stuck back there.
Janet says time spent in congestion on the motorway directly hits her pocket. She reckons she loses between £300 and £400 every week.
When you get this, I mean, I missed out on a function last week because I had to go down to a meeting with our marketing manager down to Cardiff. And because it took so long to get back, by the time I dropped her back, it was 5:15. There was no way I was going to be able to get back to the meeting again in Cardiff at 6. So I just went home.
Janet says the M4 is a real asset when it's working well, but when it's snarled up, it's bad for business.
You have one smack on the Calder roundabout or on the tunnels that bring glass, and Newport comes to a grinding halt because everybody's trying to seek alternative ways to get round it, to fulfill their obligations. They do an enormous amount of networking. 99 times out of 100, you will, having a cup of coffee, oh, I got stuck in this for like 2 hours. You know, it took me such and such. It's become a standard topic of conversation now.
There hasn't always been congestion on the M4. Construction work began in the mid-60s. The first sections in Wales opened a few years later and were followed by various extensions until the last stretch at Britain Ferry, the so-called missing link, was completed in 1994. I can see for miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. The original sections of the M4 were designed and built to carry about 2,500 vehicles per hour. Today, the busiest stretch between Cardiff and Newport carries nearly double that. Last year, it's estimated that around 38 million vehicles used the M4 in Wales.
Back in the 1980s, I used to live here in the shadow of the M4 here in Newport. In fact, this was my local, and my home was just behind. And even then, 20 years ago, the motorway was constantly with you. In fact, you could hear the rumble of the motorway all through the night.
All day and night, it's the job of Gwent police officers like Andy Elliott to patrol the M4 from the Second Severn crossing to the west of Newport. Whether it's bumps and shunts or major accidents, it's often the traffic cops who have to deal with it.
We've got 44 miles of M4 to patrol, and within that short section, we've actually got 11 motorway junctions. It is a unique stretch of motorway, and inherently with junctions, with people slowing for junctions, with people perhaps misjudging the exit or entering the motorway dangerously. Yep, it's a busy stretch of motorway, and there are more collisions on this particular stretch of motorway than perhaps the other sections of the M4 going up towards London.
This was the scene in 2007 when a car was driven headlong into oncoming traffic. 5 people were killed. Of course, accidents like this are rare, but much more minor incidents can still have a major impact. This was a couple of weeks ago, after a lorry overturned. The westbound carriageway near Mega was closed for hours. The police have been criticised for how long they've closed the motorway after some accidents, but Sergeant Andy Elliott is in no doubt that it's necessary.
There may be a number of casualties on the floor. I can't just, you know, for the family's sake, just sweep up the debris, sweep up the deceased or maybe body parts, and just, you know, put them in a bag and say, there we are. You know, every family has got a right to know how their loved ones have died.
Neighbouring South Wales Police decided to stop routine patrols on the M4 earlier this year in a row over funding. But Gwent have told us that they have no intention of following suit.
Gwent Police have recently reviewed the number of police officers we've got performing patrolling the motorway network and in and around the major trunk roads in and around Gwent. And we've actually increased the number of staff doing that function. We've moved it up by about 15 to 20%. And that has given us the ability to police all the road network and also maintain a permanent presence on the motorway. And with the infrastructure we've got for cameras, for automatic number plate recognition, and the offences that we get brought to light because people travelling along the M4, we wouldn't seek to change that.
A familiar sight if you travel regularly on the motorway near Cardiff. Work to widen it to 3 lanes has been going on for more than 2 years and is due to finish early next year. But that won't be the end of the miles of traffic cones along the M4. We're being told there could be roadworks on the motorway in and around South East Wales for as long as 4 years. What message do you think the roadworks, the speed limits for 50 miles an hour, what kind of message does that send to particularly people visiting Wales?
Well, I think the message it sends is the government really wants to make sure that the M4 is resilient going forward. There's carriageway widening, which means that you can carry more capacity. We're also making sure that it's a lot safer through having the central reservation strengthened. And of course, we're changing a lot of the junctions there so people will find it easier to get on and off. Now, clearly, I understand how frustrating it must be for people to find that during the work going ahead, they're being delayed. But I think at the end of the day, we'll have a much better network.
So how frustrated are drivers who use the M4? Are they prepared to put up with more roadworks? We went to the services at Mega to see if people are beginning to lose patience.
It's been roadworks what seems like years. So terrible, dread coming over here.
Hopefully one day we won't have to stop-start and watch the speed at the 50 mile per hour limit so much.
I try and avoid it now. I try and make all of my appointments to avoid rush hour.
Terrible. Absolutely dreadful, especially obviously at peak times, first thing in the morning and last thing in the evening.
Do you think that ordinary members of the public in Wales have got the patience to wait?
What I need to reassure people is that the government understands that frustration. I mean, you know, we are ordinary travellers as well. I mean, I travel, as you know, I travel on that road. I know exactly how people feel about it.
At the moment, from Newport until the A48M is all 50, even in the middle of the night, even on a Sunday morning. That irritates people.
Yeah, I understand that. You know, I fully appreciate that. But the end result is that 50 mile an hour limit is not going to be a permanent one.
The speed limit will be in place until next October. Then, in time for the Ryder Cup in Newport, variable speed limits will be brought in between the junctions at the Colger and Tredegar Park. It's hoped congestion will be eased by controlling the speed of the traffic at critical times of the day. The new system will replace the average speed cameras. One of the reasons why so much more improvement work is being planned for the motorway is the decision by the Welsh Assembly Government not to go ahead with the M4 Relief Road. This was its planned route, south of Newport and through the Gwent levels. It's been talked about for nearly 20 years, and just 2 years ago, after the motorway was closed following 2 particularly serious accidents, this is what Ieuan Wyn-Jones said.
Hopefully, we could start the work in 2010 with an anticipated completion date of 2013.
But in July, he controversially decided to abandon plans for the relief road, saying the cost, £1 billion, was too much. The decision to scrap the new motorway was welcomed by environment campaigners, but not everybody was happy.
I'm very disappointed that the Assembly have actually squandered and frittered away a wonderful opportunity to have done something 10 years ago and to finish it, because clearly we don't want a reputation of being one of the worst bottlenecks in the UK. And it's something, in my opinion, which should have been sorted out years ago when we had the 10 years of a feast, so to speak, and by now everything should have been complete and traffic would have been moving freely again. This isn't about Newport. Like you say, this is about Cardiff, Swansea, this Carmarthen, Cross Hands, and it's so important for the region to ensure that traffic moves freely for businesses and for the tourist industry.
When you heard that the M4 Relief Road isn't going ahead, were you disappointed then?
I was disappointed, but it didn't really surprise me. There's the issue, of course, of upfront cost, construction cost, land acquisition cost, and so on. And of course, in the background, we slumped into this recession.
Do you think it was a straightforward decision? We couldn't afford it?
I think in the longer term, there's no doubt an M4 relief route needs to be constructed. When we reinvigorate the scheme, I cannot be certain, but I cannot imagine in the long term we can do without an improved M4 around Newport. There are lots of good reasons to increase the capacity of the M4 corridor. And I have to say ultimately that putting this new route around Newport has to be part of that improved trunk route from Ireland to England and on to the continent.
The £1 billion price tag for the planned relief road may have proved too much in the end. But the Welsh Assembly government has been criticised for already spending £15 million on feasibility studies for it. On top of that, it also spent £6 million buying properties along the proposed route in the Gwent levels. It sold some of those properties and is renting out the others. And the government insists the money spent testing its feasibility wasn't wasted. It's helped it plan alternative schemes to combat congestion along the motorway.
If you really wanted to improve the network across the South Wales coast, wasn't the obvious thing to go ahead as quick as you could with the M4 relief road?
Well, even with the best will in the world, you couldn't have actually started that relief road for at least 5 years and probably not completed until 2017 or 18. It wasn't really the answer in the short term.
But surely it's not the job of ministers to think in the short term. It's the job of ministers to think in the long term. Perhaps you should have been the one that bit the bullet and said, we need that extra road.
Yeah, but we simply could not afford to build the new road. And actually, we can do a lot of the work a lot quicker and actually to provide people with the alternatives that they need.
One of the Welsh Assembly Government's big ideas to ease congestion on the M4 starts here at Mega, east of Newport. They want a kind of relief road without having to build a new motorway. If you come with me, we'll have a look at what's involved.
As well as improving the junction at Mega, it would beef up this section of the road which runs past the Tesco distribution centre. Then the route will use the existing dual carriageway which runs through the Cora steelworks site at Llanwern. Then it's onto the Southern Distributor Road. It runs around the south of the city through Newport's docks area. It joins up with the M4 at junction 28 at Tredegar Park. The Assembly Government hopes that route can be up and running in about 2 years.
The Welsh Assembly Government hopes that in the future that'll take around 10% of the traffic off the M4.
That new route hinges on Chorus allowing the Welsh Assembly Government to use the existing private road through its site. The steelmaker says it's keen to help, but nothing's been signed yet. If a deal can be reached, will it really make a difference?
I'm yet to be convinced with the current plans and proposals that that will actually help.
I would prefer to see that as very much a short-term interim solution. But yes, I suppose ultimately if motorways are given the red light forever, and that's a long time, then maybe that will remain the solution, just a bit-part solution south of Newport.
All that will happen is once the traffic leaves at Mega and goes along through the steelwork site, you're creating an additional bottleneck there, and there'll also be an additional bottleneck on the other side of Newport.
One of the existing pinch points on the M4 is the Bringlass tunnels at Newport, where the motorway goes down to 2 lanes each way. Week in, week out understands that the possibility of constructing a new tunnel was looked at by the Welsh Assembly Government. The option wasn't cheap, at around £300 million, but experts decided in the end it wasn't necessary.
We think that by doing all the work that we have planned, that the throughput through the Bringlass tunnels could be reduced by up to 11%, which is a very significant reduction. If you actually look at all the things that we have planned, it's not just about taking people off the motorway, it's actually giving them real alternatives in terms of public transport.
Plans to improve public transport include building new train stations, electrifying the main line from South Wales to London, and expanding park and ride schemes. Until public transport improves, it's not really an option for our commuter, Katie Phillips. We asked her to keep a video diary for a week to find out how the motorway performed as she made her daily 60-mile round trip from her home near Bridgend to work in Newport. She found mixed results.
I've been travelling at about 3 or 4 miles an hour since I've got out of the office, and I'm still probably about 5-10 minutes queue till I get on the M4. Got home in record time today. It took me half an hour. There wasn't any traffic. Just goes to show that leaving a few minutes earlier makes a massive difference to my journey time. Just past the speed camera before junction 30 and the traffic's all stopped. Been here for a couple of minutes, just starting to creep forward now. This is pretty much where it happens every morning. This is by far the worst traffic I've ever been stuck in on the way home from work. Crawled along at 30 miles an hour until the end of the roadworks by Cardiff Gate. Got out of there, the speed limit went back up to 60, managed to do that for about 5 minutes, and now I'm crawling along at 15 miles an hour just before Pencoed. Each lane, there's actually been an accident. All the lanes are jammed up. Yeah, the traffic is terrible. The speed limit's down to 40, but I'm doing 10 miles an hour at the moment, and I don't think I'm going to get much over that either. All 3 lanes are completely chock-blocked. Yeah, nothing's really moving very much.
Some good trips to and from work for Katie, but plenty of bad ones too. So was that a typical week's commute on the M4 for her?
It was actually quite quiet that week. It was quite quieter than normal for some of the days, especially going back. The traffic has been really, really bad recently, like queuing to get on there, onto the M4. But on, I think it was the Thursday evening, the traffic was absolutely horrendous, all the way back as far as Pencoed, the worst traffic I'd ever been stuck in on the way home. It took me about an hour to get back.
There's no end in sight to the roadworks which Katie and other commuters have to put up with. The road widening should be finished soon, but more work, costing tens of millions of pounds, is planned for several years to come. But it won't be finished in time to improve Katie's journey.
Yeah, I'm looking to move closer again, yeah, because it's just, the travelling just takes a big chunk out of my day. That is, yeah, it's frustrating being stuck in traffic all the time.
Whilst it is frustrating for people, at least they want to be reassured that the works that we're doing there, these are not sort of short-term maintenance works, these are real improvements. And once they're all in place, I'm pretty sure that people will feel very happy with them.
We've had months and months already of roadworks being carried out around Newport. At times it's 20 miles an hour, sometimes it's 1 lane, sometimes it's 2. At best, it's 50 miles an hour. Do you see that as worth it for the road improvements that there'll be?
Hopefully we can consider it a necessary evil, and in the longer term it will have added improvements to ensure that people can move more freely. But I think only time will tell whether this will really have an impact. And of course I would argue the only real solution to reduce the congestion would have been the M4 relief road.
I've seen so many sticking plaster fixes, putting over gaping wounds for a long time. It's almost as if, let's go for the short fix because it's not going to cost us so much money, and let's ignore the fact that maybe in 5 years' time, the short fix that we've done, you know, we're back with the same problem.
The Green Wales season continues, catching up with the family in Holywell who are going green. That's tomorrow night, 8:30, here on BBC One Wales.